Ivan Pavlov did not set out to discover a fundamental law of learning. He was a physiologist, specifically, a physiologist interested in digestion, and he was awarded the Nobel Prize in 1904 not for psychology but for his research on the digestive glands of dogs. It was in the course of that research, however, that he made the observation that would change the history of psychology entirely. His dogs began salivating before the food arrived. This might seem trivial. Of course, dogs salivate in anticipation of food. We have all seen it. But Pavlov, with the disciplined curiosity of a great scientist, recognized that this anticipatory salivation was not simply a biological reflex. It was a learned response. The dogs were not salivating to food. They were salivating to stimuli that had been reliably associated with food: the sound of approaching footsteps, the sight of a lab coat, the click of a particular mechanism. Neutral stimuli had acquired the power to trigger a physiological response. Pavlov spent the rest of his career systematically investigating this phenomenon, which he called the conditioned reflex. The basic architecture of classical conditioning involves 4 elements. The first is the unconditioned stimulus, a stimulus that naturally and automatically triggers a response without any prior learning. Food is an unconditioned stimulus for salivation. The second is the unconditioned response, the natural, unlearned reaction to the unconditioned stimulus. Salivation in response to food is an unconditioned response. The third is the conditioned stimulus, initially a neutral stimulus that produces no relevant response on its own, but which, after being repeatedly paired with the unconditioned stimulus, comes to elicit a response by itself. In Pavlov's experiments, a bell or metronome served as the conditioned stimulus. The fourth is the conditioned response, the learned response to the conditioned stimulus. After conditioning, the sound of the bell alone causes salivation. The process works like this: before conditioning, the bell means nothing to the dog physiologically. It does not trigger salivation. But when the bell is consistently sounded just before food is presented, the nervous system begins to detect a reliable temporal relationship between the two events. The bell predicts the food. And once the brain has learned that prediction, it begins preparing the body for food the moment the bell sounds, hence the conditioned salivation. The neutral stimulus has become a conditioned stimulus, and the organism now responds to it as if it were the real thing. What made this discovery so significant was not the salivating dogs themselves, but the principle they demonstrated, that associations between events can become encoded in the nervous system in a way that produces genuine physiological responses. This was not a matter of conscious deliberation or willful choice. It happened automatically, below the level of awareness, driven by the simple statistical fact of repeated co-occurrence. The implications were enormous. Classical conditioning explains phobias. A person bitten by a dog may develop an intense fear response to all dogs, or to features associated with the original attack, such as a particular sound or smell. The neutral stimulus has become a conditioned stimulus for fear. It explains the emotional power of music. Songs heard during emotionally significant events become conditioned stimuli for the emotions of those events, which is why a 3-minute song can reproduce grief or joy with startling intensity years later. It explains placebo effects. Neutral pills, reliably associated with symptom relief, can begin to produce genuine physiological improvement through conditioning mechanisms alone. It also explains much of what happens in advertising. Marketers spend enormous effort pairing their products, initially neutral stimuli, with images, sounds, and narratives that already elicit positive emotional responses. The product becomes a conditioned stimulus for those feelings. The association is built through repetition, and it operates below conscious awareness. We do not choose to feel warmly toward a brand because we have reasoned our way to that feeling. We feel it because the nervous system has been conditioned. Pavlov's framework also laid the groundwork for understanding addiction. Environments and social cues associated with drug use can become powerful conditioned stimuli that trigger cravings, even after long periods of abstinence. This is why recovering addicts often report intense cravings when they return to familiar environments, not because they have consciously chosen to want the substance, but because the conditioning runs deep in their nervous systems. Classical conditioning reveals something both humbling and important. Much of what we feel is not a result of deliberate thought. It is the echo of association, the legacy of repeated co-occurrences encoded in neural circuits we cannot directly inspect or easily override. The mind is, in part, a machine for learning what predicts what, and it operates that machinery continuously, whether we are aware of it or not. Subscribe to Psychology Theories Explained to explore more of the ideas that shape the modern mind.